Hello, everyone. Welcome to our session on invoicing, revenue recognition, and project accounting capabilities in project operations. We'll start with a quick intro about our presenters. I am Rupa Mantharwadi, and I'm a PM on the R&D team of project operations. And in my part of the session, I will be showing you project invoicing capabilities. And here with me in the session is my colleague Sigita.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sigita Chapaitine, and I'm also a product manager with project operations team. And I'm going to cover today project accounting and revenue recognition.
For this first part of the session, I will play the role of a project invoicing persona. The first and foremost responsibility of an invoicing persona is to be able to create accurate invoices on time. I'll now show you features in project operations that will help me achieve this goal. Firstly, I'm here on the global invoicing dashboard. This is a dashboard that I built using the native charting capabilities on the Dataverse platform without writing a single line of code. This is all using the data in project operations. And so what you see here is time and material billing backlog by contract for the contracts that I'm responsible for. I can also see fixed price milestones that are for the contracts that I'm managing, and I can review them and mark them as ready to invoice. In addition, I can also see any product backlog items that are waiting to be invoiced. And just for a terminology, what I mean by billing backlog is any financial activity that has been recorded against these projects and contracts that is waiting to be billed. My task today is to invoice this contract, the PMC consolidated fabrication work. At a glance, I can see that there is $10,990 waiting to be invoiced on this contract. With a quick drill down, I can see the transactions that make up the $10,990. Because the charts are interactive, when I click on a bar on the left, I can see the filters applied on the right to the transactions that show up. And looking at these transactions, I'm able to tell that a few of them have failed not to exceed validations, while a few of them have succeeded. The reason why this validation is in place is because anytime there is a contractual term violation against any financial activity recorded on the project, project operations flags that as a failed transactions, just so I don't get to send erroneous invoices to my customer. Now, if I select these transactions and I try to mark them as ready to invoice, the system will validate them and come back to give me this message that, hey, there are some transactions here that have failed a particular contractual term. In this case, it is the not to exceed validation. So I'm unable to move forward with these transactions, which is a check that is very useful so that I can send accurate invoices. So let's go to the order and see what is happening here. The contract has been set up with a not to exceed limit of $500. So the transactions that I'm trying to mark as ready to invoice, they are being validated against this limit. And so I'm not being allowed to process them. Now, if we go back and let's just put one filter here on this to filter those that have actually failed. So let me filter the transactions here and say, let me see the ones that specially failed. And I can see that there is $300 of successful transactions, but there is 3,690 that have failed. So this puts the spotlight on the ones that have failed. And what I see here is there is some work that my project manager did that about 4 hours of work, and there is some work that my consulting lead put in, 5 hours of work, and there is also some expenses, car rental expenses, that have failed the not to exceed validation. I could have a couple of options here. I could renegotiate the not to exceed cap on this contract and then change it. In this case, I've already done that, so I'm okay to bill the work by the project manager, consulting lead, as well as the car rental expense. So I'm going to update the not to exceed limit on the contract to a different amount that was previously agreed upon with the customer. And I'll save the contract with that new cap. And then if I go back to the dashboard, and look at the transactions and filter those that I need to for this specific contract, what I can do now is I can multi-select all of these financial activity and simply re-evaluate the not to exceed limit. The system re-evaluates them and I no longer see any transactions having failed that validation, and now I'm free to proceed. I can multi-select and mark them as ready to invoice. This same kind of an experience I have with fixed price milestones and product backlog items as well. So that is a little bit about how you can manage billing backlog without moving anywhere too far from the dashboard experiences. Let's now dial down and put the focus on the actual invoice creation. In project operations, you have three ways in which you can create an invoice for a project contract. One of the ways is by going to the project contract, the specific project contract that you'd like to create an invoice, and then click on the button to create an invoice. That will generate one invoice specific for this contract. Another way to create a project invoice is to look at your contracts list page. This shows me all the contracts that I'm responsible for. And here you can multi-select project contracts and create multiple invoices for each of these contracts and sort of trigger a bulk creation of project invoices. A third and more powerful way is to automate the process of invoice creation. So if I go into the settings area of project operations, there is a recurring invoice setup where I need to create one entry here for a automated process that will help me create invoices. So it's important that this job is named with the words create invoice in it, and you can set a certain frequency for this daily process, for this process to run. I've chosen daily over here. And once you save this job or this particular automated process, you will have the option of starting a workflow. And once you start the workflow, you can start one of these two workflows, process runner or process run caller. And when you start this workflow, that sets in motion an automated process that wakes up every day in this case and looks at all the contracts that I'm responsible for and then creates an invoice based on the invoice schedule. So for the order that we were looking at, or the contract that we were looking at, with the consolidated fabrication work, if you look at the contract lines, the contract line has a certain schedule. So each contract line on a contract could have a separate invoice schedule. And if you look at this particular line, I can see that there is a monthly, on the first Monday of every month, there is a schedule to create an invoice. So that automated job that you have just configured will run and automatically create invoice on the day that it is supposed to. And the invoice that it creates will include all the transactions that have been marked as being ready to invoice. So that's a little bit about invoice creation. And now, for the purposes of this demo, I'm going to manually create the invoice that I'm supposed to on the consolidated fabrication work. So I'm going to click the button to create the invoice. And as I mentioned, this will create just one invoice for this particular contract. And once the invoice is created, it is still in draft status. So which means that I, as a project manager, will be able to make edits if I need to on any of the transactions on the invoice. So the invoice is created and it has put in the amount, which is the collection of all the financial activity. But if you notice, the total amount on this invoice is 0. And that is because if I scroll down, there is a prepayment or an advance that we received from the customer for $4,000. So we have used that advance. And so there is a remaining advance of $10, but then that we could still use on a future invoice. But the total on this invoice that we'll be asking the customer is 0. It's just a reconciliation against the financial activity that or cost that we incurred against the advance that we received from the customer. If I drill down into these lines and what comprises of that 3,390, you can see the chargeable and the non-chargeable transactions. The non-chargeable transactions do not add to the total, the chargeable ones do. And I can change the quantities and amounts on these, and then once I'm satisfied, I could confirm the invoice. So I don't plan to make any changes to this invoice, so I can go ahead and confirm this. And this in turn will send the invoice to our project accounting module. And this module is really geared towards the project accountant and the centralized invoicing department. This is our invoicing module, the project accounting invoicing module. And in this module, I have the ability to, as an accountant, to be able to edit sales tax information on the invoice. And more importantly, I can also change the layout of this invoice. And the experiences that we have around changing the layout of the invoice is really advanced and very powerful. You could have a setting to override the layout for one specific invoice. You can have a setup where you create a neat layout that you and the customer agreed on, and your customer have agreed on, and set it up for all invoices against that particular contract engagement. Or you could have an agreed on format for any project contracts for that customer, so that you don't have to rethink this, and you only need to think when there are some exceptions, when the customer would like to see a different kind of format for one specific invoice. And the formatting is not simply restricted to the layout where the address prints or where the amounts print. We also have capabilities where you can put in a summarization on the invoice that is slightly different for each invoice. So whereby on one invoice, you can decide you'll roll up based on roles, or another invoice, you could decide that you'll have one line per class of transactions. Say all time is summarized as one line, all expenses are summarized at one line. So that is a little bit about the printed invoice. There are also settings here that can help you with how you distribute the invoice. Is it going out as a PDF? Is it going out as a Word document? And who is the bill to contact that it is hitting? So those are some of the capabilities that are coming from the project accounting module on how the invoice is created, printed, and then sent to the customer. Despite all the checks and balances that we have in the system, where your transactions are validated and you're not allowed to send a contract or an invoice that's in violation of a contractual term, there could be scenarios where the customer disputes an invoice that you have sent them. For these cases, project operations supports the ability to correct an invoice. So this is the invoice that we had previously confirmed. And I can, for example, decide that the 5 hours of consulting lead time, I do not want to bill all 5 hours because the customer has disputed those 5 hours. I maybe only want to bill them for 3. So I could correct this invoice. And what this does is basically generates a new draft invoice with all the transactions that were previously included on the original invoice. And we'll see that in just a bit. So there's our draft invoice, and the system has made an assumption that we are returning all of that amount back to the customer. But that's not so in my case. I only want to return 2 hours of that 5 hours of consulting lead time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply go ahead and delete all transactions that I don't want to correct. And I will also remove the ones that we have settled on the non-chargeable. Because these are transactions that I do not want to change or correct. So we're now left with only that one transaction from the consulting lead. So if I open up this transaction, basically I can see that originally I had billed the customer for 5 hours, but now I want to bill them for 3. And that in turn changes the value of this invoice. And if I go back to the invoice, it will show exactly how much we are returning to the customer. So we are returning about $900. And that correction we had with the retainer, I'll just remove that because I don't need to correct that part. So I have about $900 that I'm returning to the customer in this scenario. So I go ahead and confirm this correction, and that will result in the same process again. It'll be sent to the accounting module and then sent off to the customer pay for the corrective invoice. That was a brief overview of project invoicing capabilities. I'll now turn it over to Sigita.
Thank you, Rupa. Project operations helps managing financials at every project phase. Let's briefly talk about key capabilities in this area. First of all, accounting rules and revenue recognition principles can be set for all projects, project groups, or specific projects using something that we call project cost and revenue profiles. For example, you can configure posting project costs to your short-term projects directly to the profit and loss accounts and use work in progress, or as we call it, WIP accounts, for your long-term projects. We support percentage completion, completed contract, straight line, and work in progress revenue recognition calculation methods. System can calculate revenue estimates automatically on a periodic basis based on project forecast and actual transactions that project team members are entering over the period. Or accountant can review those calculation results and adjust if needed and confirm recording to the general ledger. I have a demo ready for you just in a minute, so we will look at a quick example soon. Project cash inflow and outflow is tracked in project operations both from actuals and estimates perspective. Project's cash flow seamlessly integrates with Dynamics 365 Finance. Therefore, you can take into account such detail as expected payment days and actual payments, and that seamlessly transitions and can be used further down in accounts receivable. Dynamics 365 Finance Foundation provides project operations with solid capabilities in sales tax or VAT calculation, both in cost side of transactions, where, for example, we could use recoverable or non-recoverable tax for expense transactions, and it can be sales tax included or excluded. Both configurations are possible. And also on the sales side, where you can calculate sales tax or VAT on project-related invoices based on project and delivered service combination. Currency framework within Dynamics 365 Finance allows setting up multiple exchange rate types for amounts conversions from transactional currency to accounting reporting currencies. And further down, you can also use in Dynamics 365 Finance capabilities like import from third-party services like Oanda, so you don't need to maintain those exchange rates on a daily basis manually. And the last but not the least, with the help of Financial Dimensions Framework, we can set desired number of attributes specific to customer business. And those attributes can be such as region or, for example, organizational division. And these attributes can be set on a customer, project contract, project level, and system will use these to default on specific transactions. So project team member do not need to worry about these and just can worry to report on operational side of the transaction. Okay, so with that, I do have an example and quick demo scenario prepared that we are going to go through in the next couple of minutes. So we will look at the sample project, what I call a Datum Mini Remodel project. And this project goes over the course of 3 months. And based on the customer, we have $10,000 that we have agreed to bill the customer, and that amount is invoiced using 2 billing milestones, one of those in January and another one in March. And we have some estimated work and expense that we were planning to spend on this project in the beginning of the project. And actually, actuals have been recorded on this over the course of the 3 months. We will look in a second how in a product system can help you to calculate revenue in such an example. Okay, so let's take a look at that mini remodel project that I have configured in project operations. If I will look into the details, I have already pre-configured all the estimates and project contract plan for this project to speed up the demo. So if I will go and look into the estimates tab, we can see that I have some the tasks that I have been planning around this project that span across the 3 months, and the quantity that I have planned to spend on all of those tasks and I can see the distribution of the cost price on a daily basis, or I can switch it to the monthly basis to see all the details. And I can also see that I have expense, as we had in our demo scenario, of 200 miles that I also have been planned to spend, and all of them are coming in a January timeframe. So we do have estimates, and also to speed up the demo, I have pre-recorded actuals for those 3 months that I have been flowing in. And if I will just quickly look at the totals, I can see that I have estimated labor cost of $4,800 and estimated expense cost of $2,000. And my actuals have been already recorded here. So I have actuals of $3,600 and actual expense cost is $1,000. And I have completed all that effort in 30 hours because that was a little bit quicker than I originally estimated. I can also review it in the tracking view. So if I will look in the details and I see that breakdown based on the specific tasks within my project, I can see what effort has been planned on each of those tasks. And I can see what is my percentage completed already on these tasks, and how long did it took for me to actually complete these tasks, and what is the variance based on what originally estimated. I can look at this both from the quantity perspective and from the cost perspective, and can see all the details how I've been executing against the plan. So that's the operational view. Let's take a look how that accountant can take that operational detail and calculate revenue out of it. I'm switching to accountant view. And first that we are going to look at is fixed price revenue estimate projects. Fixed price revenue estimate projects, it's a group of projects or a single project where you are calculating your revenues out of the fixed fee transactions. And I could calculate these revenues either, as in my example, just for that mini remodel project, or I could group multiple projects together and select additional projects and calculate the revenue for all of these in the single shot. I can also assign project cost and revenue profiles to those projects. So let's take a look how this project is set up. You can see that I'm going to calculate revenue for this project based on the fixed price percentage completion method. And principle used for the project completion is completed percentage. I'm using predefined cost template that allows me to group transactions based on their categories and define separate rules, how those should be included into my revenue calculations. And also I can define the periods, how frequently I want to calculate my revenue estimation. And in my case, I'm doing revenue estimation every month. So let's go back to this fixed price revenue project, and let's try to calculate some revenue estimates. Okay, as I'm just starting, I haven't calculated it for any of the months yet. I will run the first calculation, and system already suggests me that I should calculate the first revenue estimate at the end of January. And I can pick from multiple cost to complete methods. So we do support various cost to complete methods, and one of the most common used is probably total forecast to actual, where you are comparing your total forecast that have you been planning against this project versus the actuals has been entered, and system this way can calculate what is your percentage complete. I can also pick the completion method, meaning I can let system calculate everything automatically, or I can allow system to calculate automatically, but afterwards allow accountant to do manual adjustments based on the additional knowledge that he might have on this project. So let me just calculate this first estimate. I can see that it created the estimate and calculated percentage completion for that project as of the end of January. And it is right now at 35.55%. And system shows you at a glance what was the contract value of this project, what is so far invoiced revenue. And if you remember from our example, we have invoiced $2,000, and I have pre-recorded that invoice before the demo as well. And what is already the total cost that has been accumulated against that project through the January timeframe. And based on that, it calculates accrued revenue amount that I should be recognizing and recording to my general ledger. If I want to look at the breakdown of my total cost, I can look into the cost estimate. And in my example, cost estimate is very, very simple. I haven't divided my hour transactions or expense transactions into any subcategories. I could have done that and have had the various group. For example, look just at the design hours or just the installation hours on a separate lines, and I would be able easily to see that. And I can see what was the actual cost accumulated so far for this, what is remaining cost to complete, and what is the total cost based out of it. Let's post this first estimate. Once I'm posting this first estimate, I can see the ledger transaction automatically gets recorded. So into the general ledger, based on this completion method, I get amounts to my VIP sales value account and accrued revenue account. And I can just repeat this exercise for February timeframe. And we can see how system nicely calculated additional percentage completion based on the additional work that has been performed for me in February for this project. And I can quickly post that. And let's calculate the last one. That will be for March. And at this time, we can see that in the end of the March, we have additional transactions that have been calculated and completed for this project. And we have additional invoiced amount. So this way, I would continue through my revenue recognition process up until I have reached 100% of the completion. And I could manually adjust that percent of completion based on the signals that I'm getting from the project team. And once all of those calculations are done, in the end, I could eliminate my project and finalize revenue recognition and move it from the accrued revenue to the invoiced and recognized revenue at that point of time. So with that, that's a quick demo of our revenue recognition capabilities.
Thank you very much, Sigita. So here's some call to action. For those of you interested in knowing all about project operation, visit us at the help documentation that we have. You can also join our communities at Dynamics communities or on our Yammer and LinkedIn channels. And if you would love to give us feedback and badly need a feature logged, please do visit our ideas site and give us feature ideas. Always open to those. And here are some of the related sessions that you can watch, which sort of build on the content that we just showed. Thanks a lot for watching, and thank you so much, Sigita, for presenting with me.
Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.